What is up, everyone? Welcome into episode 22 of Chalk Talk Nation, or the second one of the revitalized version of Chalk Talk Nation. I'm Noah Gayhart here, as always, with Rob Rundle. Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. My stomach's still pretty full from the holidays, and as everyone knows and can probably see if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm eating good.
Yeah, I would second that. The holiday times they're rough for the old LBs. Probably put on a good 5 over the winter so far. But start things off with a little bit of some rough news today. We found out that Hall of Famer Phil Niekro passed away at the age of 81. Knuckleballer guy, kind of one of the all-time greats as far as knuckleballers go. He's a guy that played 24 years, won 318 games. And, one interesting thing that I saw about him today is that he's actually 4th all-time in career innings pitched, despite the fact that he never threw more than 100 innings in a season before he turned 28, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But I think we're just at the point now where 2020 needs to go away. Phil Niekro is the 7th Hall of Famer this year to pass away, which I believe is the most ever in a calendar year. So, Rob, how do you feel about it? You think it's time to just kick 2020 to the curb?
I definitely think so. I'm excited for 2021. I remember, New Year's Day going into 2020, like, oh, we're starting a new decade and whatnot. But now it's just like, it's like the domino effect. One thing just happens after another. But, speaking about Phil Niekro, though, I mean, this is a Hall of Famer guy. I mean, like you said, 4th all-time in innings pitched. Got inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1997. He was a knuckleballer, and 21 of those years that you mentioned were spent in Atlanta, which is where he shined the most. He posted a 3.46 FIP, which is pretty good. He had a 1.19 ERA plus and a 1.22 WHIP. So, I mean, and his strikeouts per 9 was 5.7. So he had a very good career, and I mean, there was numerous years too where he led in wins. You look back at 1979, he led Major League Baseball with 21 wins. I mean, this is not someone you can just pass over. And not only was he a good pitcher, but I mean, he was also an excellent fielder at his position. You kind of look at the Zach Greinke comparisons, but without the knuckleball. That's kind of who I kind of see him after. Same with, but he has 5 Gold Glove awards throughout his career, even when he was in his 40s, which is impressive. So baseball definitely lost an all-time great.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to counteract the sad news with probably the happiest news that we'll have today, and that's that Trey Mancini underwent his 3-month checkup scans, which had come back clean. If you guys remember, back towards the beginning of this year, we had found out that he had a tumor on his colon, and he'd have surgery to get that removed. Went through chemotherapy, and so it's gotten to the point now where all the scans are coming back clean, and they expect him to be in the lineup come opening day.
Yeah, and I want to preface this too. I mean, it is sad, when loved ones, family members, friends have cancer. I mean, millions of people are dealing with this across the world. But, no one really personally knows Trey Mancini. But from an outsider looking in, you can tell he's a genuine human being. And he's also a very good baseball player for one of the worst teams. And it's just like he gets adversity after adversity thrown at him. But it just shows how strong he is to overcome all that. And I am so excited to see him play potentially here in 2021.
Yeah, me too. We've talked about him before on the podcast. He's one of those guys that's just like a perennial all-star on a team that just isn't built around him. And I think that's going to be one of the things that's really exciting with him coming back and the Orioles kind of starting to develop that young core where there's going to be other pieces around Trey Mancini that are hopefully going to A, protect him in the lineup and make him look better, and B, just get him on a better team because the guy deserves it. I mean, like you mentioned, he's just a guy that seems really genuine, kind of fans, just checks off every box. And so it'll be nice to see him in a position that's a little bit more favorable for him in the future.
Yeah, just look at the possible outfield that they could have. They could have Trey Mancini, Anthony Santander, who's up and coming, and obviously Austin Hayes, who is a highly coveted prospect coming in. And then you have the likes of Adley Rutschman coming up too. It almost makes you miss Dylan Bundy in a way, because he absolutely shoved for the Angels this past year. But that's really the main thing. And then they had a very good high school prospect that they drafted 2nd overall. So, I mean, they're on the up and coming, and I think having that veteran leadership like Mancini coming into that team again and just like nothing even happened, I mean, people are going to look up to him, especially players that are near his age. And, you know, we talk about this too, how he deserves to be like on the Yankees or, you know, just a winning team, or at least a team that has a chance. Because as soon as he joined the Orioles, that was literally the first year when they lost everyone. Because the Orioles, if everyone remembers, back in the early 2010s when Adam Jones was in his prime, I mean, they went to the playoffs like every year. They were winning 92 to 95 ball games, but now it's just like, that's part of baseball though. But I love to see Mancini just come back, and I think we're going to be surprised yet not surprised with how well he does. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. So one thing that I do want to talk about, and it's funny that this happened like pretty much right after we recorded, like that next morning when we recorded last week's episode, right after this news kind of broke, and that's that Rob Manfred announced that the Negro Leagues are officially going to be elevated to Major League status, which is just absolutely huge for the game. So the stats and records of 3,000 plus players from 1920, 1948 is now going to be incorporated in the record books. You know, it's huge. You're just seeing like all kinds of guys that, you know, weren't necessarily getting the correct recognition that they deserved are finally being lifted up. And like, frankly, it's long overdue, but I'm glad that we're seeing it now rather than not at all. Yeah.
And it honestly breaks my heart a little bit though, for Bob Gibson, who passed away in early October this year, to not be able to get that news. But I mean, you look at Bob Gibson, 9-time Gold Glove winner at the pitching position, 9-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champion, 2-time Cy Young, an MVP even, had some ERA titles. This guy is, I mean, he is one of the best pitchers of all time in the Cardinals organization. Had a 2.91 career ERA in 528 appearances, over 3,000 strikeouts. I mean, you look at the likes, we saw Verlander notch that not too long ago, but now to bring the likes of Bob Gibson in here, which is well-deserved, I mean, it is just amazing. And he's had a lot of league-leading categories. I mean, you look at 1970 when he was 34 years old. You know, this is usually when you're starting to get past your prime. He had 23 wins and a 3.12 ERA with a 2.29 FIP. Okay, a 2.29 FIP is absolutely disgusting. I mean, so it's just, it makes me very happy that Rob Manfred announced that. Just a little, it took way too long, that's for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of stats, and that's kind of something that once it was announced and people kind of had that initial celebration, there was that thought of, oh, you know, what is this going to do to the record books? Because, you know, you're incorporating, you know, over 3,000 players' careers that weren't initially a part of the record books. And so what was that going to do? And you know, one of the things that I found the most interesting is that we officially know that Ted Williams is no longer the most recent 400 hitter in baseball, which is crazy. So yeah, and it's a guy that you've probably heard of. He's one of the, you know, most popular Negro League players of all time, and Josh Gibson. A lot of people think that he could have been the best hitter of all time had he been able to play, you know, in the MLB at the time. But he hit 486 in 1943.
Disgusting.
Had a 1351 OPS. I mean, he just mashed.
Wait. Did you say 1351 OPS?
Yeah. So here's the slash line I have.
Dude, some people can't even bat 600. Some people in Major League Baseball nowadays can't even have a 600 OPS. Wow.
Yeah. So here's his slash line, which is also just an absolute nuts slash line. So 486 batting average, 489 OBP, and an 862 slugging percentage. So one slugging percentage at 862 is just insane.
Wait. But real quick, you mentioned a 65 batting average and a 489 OBP. That just goes to show how nutty of a hitter this guy was, because he did not walk. Everything he got, he earned. That is absolutely insane.
Well, actually, it's closer than what you said. I said a 486 batting average and a 489 on base percentage.
That just proves my point even better.
He walked one time that entire season, which is just
wow.
I mean, you'd think at some point they'd stop pitching to the guy, but
that might be the best year of baseball in history by far.
Yeah. You know, and you know, there's some people have spoken out against making that like the most recent 400 hitter, just because like the amount of plate appearances is like way less than what it is in a normal season that we have now of 162 games. But it's also, that's the way that they played their leagues. They just didn't play as many games. And so, that would be my argument to that, is just kind of like, that's the hand that he was dealt in the league that he played in. And so, we didn't have anyone else putting up 486 in that number of games. So I think that that's something to take into consideration, because I know there have been people that have spoken out against that. But yeah, it's definitely crazy for the record books. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I'm excited now. After we're done with our podcast episode here, I'm going to take a look at all the updated records, because I'm just really fascinated, and I'm just so glad that this has happened. It's been long overdue. So, yeah.
Yeah. So another thing that came out like right after we had finished recording, the MLB PA, we had talked about last time how MLB had wanted to shorten the season possibly at the beginning of the year to kind of let all the players get their vaccines in before they actually start spring training and anything like that. And so the MLB PA put out a response to that and basically said that they're planning on playing a 162 game season, and that they're going to show up for spring training on time. And so that report was originally put out by Evan Drellich of The Athletic. And so basically in that report, they also stated that they have no interest in a delayed start as if it's going to mean docking pay. And basically, in short sense, good for the Players Association.
Good for the Players Association, and also good for the fans, okay? For me, I know that we're probably going to still see – we'll probably see first fans in a Major League Baseball game at least in over a year. It's still going to be limited capacity, obviously, which it should be. But I am looking forward to an August 17 matchup between the Oakland A's and the Chicago White Sox, because I would love to go. So I'm hoping for a 162 game season as well, because I don't want anything to be switched up. But no, I mean, you look at how much revenue MLB lost last year. I mean, it was inevitable. But doing that to players for 2 years in a row, especially like the minor league players too, because it's not only going to shorten the major league season, it's probably also going to shorten the minor league season, and those guys literally can't afford that. So I think it's going to be imperative that the MLBPA and Rob Manfred, they just hash this out. They need to have 2 meetings a week just to try and figure out everything. And but it'll be interesting to see how this all shapes out. So
yeah, I mean, this is something that I brought up last week on the podcast as like a possibility that we were going to hear something like this, and I think I had said then that I don't want to hear it as far as financial considerations go. I mean, we've seen it this year that the owners have really just been trying to just scrape every dollar they can out of the Players Association, and frankly, it was a bit more justified last year because we really didn't know what we were dealing with as we kind of went into the season. But now that they've had a full season to test out protocols, to test out all of these different things to ensure player safety, not necessarily that they've been doing them well. Exhibit A, Justin Turner. But it's proven that you can have some sort of bubble system or some sort of testing system that'll work, at least in the short term, to be able to get things rolling. And I think now that the Players Association has seen that, they're probably not going to be willing to make any concessions as far as starting goes, just because they know they don't have to do it and take a pay cut to do it. And so, it's going to be a storyline, I'm sure, all offseason, and who knows how things are going to be able to play out with the vaccine. But it's definitely just going to be something that we're probably going to hear a lot of going into the labor negotiations in 2021 when they do the CBA.
Now, this might be a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So typically we know that 162 game season, we have usually 3-game series with your occasional 4-game series. How would you feel about a potential 4-game series or 5-game series for different cities in the National League? If, let's say, you're the Reds, you only play the National League, but you play 4 to 5 game series, that way you're not traveling as much. Do you think that's a good idea potentially, or do you think that's something that should just be just an automatic no?
I mean, if you can find a way to make the schedule work where like you play like let's say maybe they only travel to Milwaukee, like in the Reds, for example, let's say they only travel to Milwaukee 4 times instead of 6 or 7 times, right, and they just play longer series every time. I think then, yeah, sure, that's something they could look at as a possibility. But as far as, and I don't know if this is what you meant or not, as far as just playing only in the National League, at that point, I don't really see the point, because, you're still traveling the entire country, and that's what they wanted to eliminate this season by just playing in the Central Division. But as long as you're still out and you're traveling, to me, it doesn't make that big of a difference whether you're going to an airport in Milwaukee or an airport out in California, because they're still going to an airport either way and still having that travel.
Well, my argument is that for the Reds, for instance, if you just play National League teams 4 to 5 game series, you're playing against other National League teams because they're going to be fighting whether it's for divisions or the wild card spot, which is why I say, like, you know, the Reds, they want to play a 4 to 5 game series against the Dodgers, try and get an advantage on them if they can, which is highly doubtful. But and also I think it would be really cool too if you see a whole rotation, you know, squaring off against another team. I mean, that's what the minor league teams do, that they play 4 to 5 game series throughout their season. We know it's a shorter season. Even that kind of landscape logistically would be kind of interesting to see if MLB could implement that, because I think minor league baseball, they played like 110 120 games, something like that. But I think it's feasible. I think obviously there's a lot of logistic issues and logistic possibilities that will have to be figured out, but I mean, anything and everything is on the table here to have that 162 game season. So it'll be interesting to see how everything shapes up here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I'm definitely, like, I don't want to say I'm against a 5 game series or a 4 game series, because that part of it I totally get, and that's, you know, 100%. Like, if that's what they've got to do, and that makes them, you know, whatever, reach the concessions they have to make to play 162, then sure, go for it. But, you know, I don't see the point in limiting, like, the schedule to you can only play this certain list of teams. I thought it was kind of stupid with the AL Central and NL Central this year, or just playing that way. And I think we saw a huge discrepancy in far as, like, competition, where the AL Central and NL Central teams were playing worse teams all year than more of like the bloodbath that was the AL and NL East. So I'm not sure that I'm a fan of necessarily limiting, you know, the list of teams that you play, but as far as going 4 or 5 games in a series to kind of limit that travel, I'm all for that.
Well, I mean, just real quick too. I mean, you look, I mean, if you play 20 other teams, right, at 5 game series, you know, that's 100 games right there. So you could really mix it up. I know that that's going to change because you have to play your division and stuff like that too, but maybe you do 5 game series for non-division opponents, and then maybe for your in-division opponents, you could do 3 games. Something to think about too. Anyway, continue though. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no. So I was going to go ahead and transition a little bit. We've been talking about safety. We've been talking about travel.
Oh gosh, here we go.
There's an opportunity for you to travel up and down the highway and possibly see a Mr. Hall of Fame baseball person on the side of the road.
Wait. Would that be? Would that be? Let me guess. Would that be Tony La Russa?
It might be.
Oh.
The updates continue to roll out. So he was charged with 2 Class 1 misdemeanor counts of DUI.
Wow.
And then he pled guilty to lesser the charge of that to just reckless driving. And so the punishment ended up getting released. And so for Tony La Russa, the charges are 1 day of jail time via home detention.
Are you kidding me?
A $1,383 fine and 20 hours of community service.
That's it? Dude, that's literally just like a week's... That's pocket change for him, and he'll literally finish that in like 3 days. That's so dumb. That's so dumb. Now, here's what I hate about this, okay? This is the privilege of Hall of Famers, okay? You look at an average person getting a DUI who pleaded guilty for reckless driving even. You're telling me they're just going to get 1 day, $1,800 fine, and 20 hours of community service? No. You're getting jail time. You're going to the slammer, okay? This is absolutely ridiculous. And he's already outdated, literally. It's going to be a challenge for him coaching with the youngest team in baseball. And he's just an idiot. I mean, what he did is it's just not right. And you should be punished for this. What are we telling everybody, all the baseball fans, that, I mean, it's basically what? It's okay. You'll just get a day of jail and stuff. Like, it's just, oh my gosh. It just makes me go crazy.
Yeah, the punishment for Tony La Russa is definitely on the light side for sure. But, I'm really just looking forward to the day that I get on Twitter when I wake up in the morning and just see Mr. Hall of Famer baseball person with one of those stakes on the side of the road and his nice neon vest just out there holding a trash can, picking up cans and wrappers and stuff off the side of the road, because
It's gonna happen.
that's gonna make my year when it happens.
Oh gosh, that'll be funny. That'll be funny. But I mean, I need Tony La Russa to just retire and whatnot. But I really wish this guy didn't retire. And that's Howie Kendrick, man. I mean, jeez. I mean, I understand, but I think he still could have played.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that if Howie Kendrick really wanted to continue playing, like, there would have been a spot for him in the big leagues. Especially, he really came on, it seems like, as a hitter the last couple years of his career. Like, it seemed like the numbers at the plate were just continuing to rise. And so, it's sad to see him go, especially because Howie Kendrick, I know for me, and I don't know for you, but when I first started getting into baseball, he was kind of one of those names with the Angels that just was like one of the first guys that I knew about. And so it's kind of sad for me. Just, he's had this great 15-year career, but it makes me feel old because he was a guy that was kind of coming in the league when I first started getting into baseball. And so just from that sense, it's sad to see him go.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And God bless this man so much for helping the Nationals beat the Asterix in the 2019 World Series. That was amazing. That was one of the best postseason runs I've seen. I'd say Howie Kendrick and Steve Pearce were the two that just like took me out of like, wow, did this really happen? And baseball needed more of that. And I think that was one of the best World Series that we've seen in a long time. And, like you said, he could still play. I don't think it would be like a top caliber team and whatnot, but I think, like a Kansas City Royals for veteran leadership, kind of staying in the mix or something. But, it's his decision. And especially with 2020 and not really knowing what's in store for the next year, I don't blame him.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that everyone talks about. We talked about with Trey Mancini before, just being like one of those upstanding guys that just has that kind of reputation. Howie Kendrick is way above and beyond as just being someone who's always given back, super high moral guy. And so, it wouldn't surprise me if like a few years down the road, if we saw him as a guy that maybe signed somewhere to be like a coach or something like that. And I hope for his sake that that's the case, because it's sad to see him completely out of baseball. But, as one door closes, another door opens. And so I think we'll transition now a little bit into some of the signings that we've seen in the last week and a half since we last talked. And so we were talking before, and there's one signing that had you particularly upset. So we can go ahead and start with that one. The Dodgers continue to make good moves, and they brought in Tommy Kahnle on a 2-year deal, just under $5 million. How do you feel about that, Rob?
How do I feel about that? Let's see. I feel like Billy Hamilton at the plate facing a 90-mile-per-hour changeup that drops off the table. That's how I feel. Okay, Tommy Kahnle is nasty. I don't care what his recent numbers say. The dude, 6'1", and with his stride, really gets the ball out there. He had a nasty 2017 season with the White Sox and the Yankees combined. Absolutely gross. With the White Sox, he had a 1.49 FIP, and with the Yankees, his first year with the Yankees, had a 2.3 FIP. And I'm not going to talk about 2020 because it's literally just one appearance, obviously, and he's injured. But no, man, the fact you have a 97-mile-per-hour fastball, and then a 90-mile-per-hour changeup that just drops off the table, it's absolutely gross, because you can throw that inside to right-handed batters, or, you can throw it outside, which is the same spot, to left-handed batters. And I think this is an absolute steal for the Dodgers, who, of course, they don't really need a reliever, I guess, but you know what? They just got even better. And you know what? Cheers to you, Dodgers, because that is just an absolute power move. They're like the Baltimore Ravens in the NFL, just getting all the steals and whatnot. And, oh, gosh. But you know what? It is what it is. How do you feel?
Yeah, obviously, I love it for the Dodgers. The contract's weighted more towards 2022 because he had Tommy John in August, and so he's going to miss a lot of this next season. But even just it's like a 1-year deal, for 2022, basically. Great back of the end, the bullpen arm. 2019 3.67 ERA and over 60 innings pitched. I mean, the dude. I mean, you covered it. The dude's just nasty, and it's just more riches for the Dodgers, which you hate to see as a fan of someone that is not the Dodgers, but it just makes you envious because they just continue to make move after move.
Well, and the thing is too, like Tommy Kahnle isn't your typical 3/4 pitcher that you see. He is straight over the top, okay? And when you see the rotation looks the same as the fastball when he throws that changeup. And a 7-mile-per-hour difference that still touches 90 is absolutely disgusting. It's disgusting. And especially being in pitcher ballparks all in the NL West, that is huge for him. Well, except for the Rockies, of course. So I think he's going to absolutely shove when he comes back.
Yeah, me too. So speaking of guys that people hope are shoving, the Rangers went out and they made a move here in the last couple of days. We're seeing our first posted player sign, and that's Kohei Arihara. He signed a 2-year, $6.2 million deal with the Rangers. He's a guy that's likely going to slot into their starting rotation right away. 28 years old, pitched in the NPB, 3.46 ERA in 132 innings in his last season. It's a good signing for them. We've seen them already pick up Dane Dunning in that trade where they sent Lance Lynn over to the White Sox. And so they're, the Rangers are out here making moves this offseason.
Yeah, and I mean, the more this happens, I'm sure we'll talk about this later. I just keep seeing Texas as a great place for Trevor Bauer to sign, to be honest with you. I mean, they're making moves and whatnot, and Kohei Arihara is just another great one. I mean, this is a guy who isn't going to punch a lot of guys out, but he has a lot of rotation on his fastball and his changeup and his splitter. And he's pretty gross, and he hides the ball well. I think you see that with a lot of Japanese arms, and it's like a boomerang. I mean, it just whips when he throws the ball. It's insane, and I think that's where he gets that rotation from. And he doesn't give up a lot of home runs. His home runs per 9 for the past 3 years, 0.87. That's nasty, and especially with the way the baseballs have been in Major League Baseball for the past 2 years. It will be interesting to see how that correlates with everything, but typically in the AL West, they are all pitcher ballparks. I mean, to a T. So I think he's going to surprise some people for sure. I think he's going to be a good number. I'd say probably a number 2 or 3, more safely as a 3 right now. But I mean, by mid-season, maybe after the All-Star break, I wouldn't be surprised to see him even climb up the rotation even more. So it'll be interesting to see. So hopefully he's not like Yusei Kikuchi or, we'll see.
Yeah, to me, like, I'm not sure that he's going to eventually ever end up, unless something goes really right for him in Texas, as a top of the rotation guy. But, you're only sinking $3 million a year into him, plus the $1 million posting fee for a guy that has thrown 6 pitches basically his whole career. And so you think with MLB development, if you bring a guy over with 6 pitches that's already pitching at a pretty high level, they're probably going to be able to find a few of those pitches that are going to be good out pitches in the MLB. There are concerns about his fastball and how that's going to play, but he's also got a cutter. He's got good off-speed stuff, and I think that it's a safe option for them, and I think that because they're not expecting to be super competitive right away, that it takes some of the pressure off of him, in his first year while he can go ahead and get adapted. So those are the 2 biggest signings. So I want to run through the list of these other guys real quick, and then if there's any that stand out to you, we can talk about them. So Jose Urena went to the Tigers, Daniel Bard to the Rockies, Alex Claudio to the Angels, Mike Zunino to the Rays, former Red Anthony DeSclafani now with the Giants, Michael Wacha to the Rays, and John Brebbia to the Giants. Are there any of those guys that stand out to you as good pickups?
I mean, Daniel Bard for sure. I mean, just the whole story with Daniel Bard coming back with the Rockies. I mean, that's just something you'll love to see, and I think it was a smart signing because fans are going to want to watch him pitch. And so that's my favorite. And for those who are listening, tweet us like at Chalk Talk Nation. Let us know which signing you think is the best so far, or how you feel about Kohei Arihara. But I will say Daniel Bard is my favorite, and my least favorite is Anthony DeSclafani. He is not worth $6 million, and I will say that until I die.
Well, I disagree with
I knew you were going to disagree with me. I knew you were going to because you're a Reds fan. It's okay. You can be subjective.
It's not that I'm being subjective about Anthony DeSclafani. It's just that, it's a 1-year deal. And so, any 1-year deal is really not a bad deal because there's the opportunity to trade him at the deadline. Or if it doesn't work out, you're not you're not held liable for that for more than just that season. But Anthony DeSclafani is surprisingly good when he's healthy. But that's kind of the big caveat is when he's healthy. Exactly. And so, I don't mind them taking a flyer on him for 1 year. $6 million, I think, is probably fair, especially in a market where Kevin Gausman's getting 19. I think 6 is fair for Anthony DeSclafani.
I mean, I will say that because that Kevin Gausman signing was absolutely horrendous. But, dude, -6 WAR, 7.22 ERA. I mean, I know his 9 appearances and whatnot, but, dude, DeSclafani is not worth $9 million. $6 million, excuse me. They need to spend money in other places. That team is so broken, and it's just mind-boggling. I mean, if he's healthy, sure, we'll see, potential 3.5 ERA and whatnot, and maybe a 3.8 FIP. We'll see. But I don't know, man.
Well, here's the last thing I'll say about it is they're kind of just spending money to spend money because the Giants are usually a team that have a higher payroll.
Because they sell out.
Right now, you've got the Dodgers, who just came off the World Series, and you've got the Padres, who have this just incredible young core, and they're looking to add to it this offseason. So at best, if you're the Giants, you're competing for a second wildcard spot, and that's best case scenario. And with their current roster, they're probably not going to do that. So a guy like Anthony DeSclafani makes sense to sign because if he comes out and he produces and he's healthy, he's got the potential to be an above-average starter. And he's a guy that you can flip at the deadline because he's only on a 1-year deal, so teams aren't going to have to commit to that long term. And worst case scenario is he's healthy and he eats innings, or he gets injured and he comes off the books at the end of the year. So to me, it seems like a low-risk, high-reward type of signing for them. Now, does it make sense? If I'm Anthony DeSclafani, that's probably not my preferred destination, but that could have just been the best deal for him, and maybe he's able to improve his value and then sign somewhere else next year. And so, speaking of guys that improve their value, my favorite signing off this list, because I'm just curious to see what's going to happen, is Michael Wacha to the Rays. The Rays are basically just a pitching factory. I think that's kind of just become common knowledge at this point. They just continually get guys off the scrap heap and just turn them into just elite level pitchers. Home runs were a big problem for Michael Wacha last year. He gave up 9 of them in 34 innings pitched, which is just awful. But then he also had career best strikeout per 9 and walk per 9. And so I'm guessing that's what the Rays are looking at, and they think maybe they can turn him into something. But, as a Reds fan, I saw Michael Wacha's first few years in the league just absolutely dominate the Reds every time we played him. And so if the Rays can kind of squeeze that back out of him, then he could be an interesting pitcher option this year.
How much did the Rays sign him for?
$3 million.
Okay. See, that's a little bit better. That's where I would have liked the Giants to sign DeSclafani, because Michael Wacha, I feel, is kind of like in the same area right now, performance-wise, as Anthony DeSclafani. I think if Michael Wacha's healthy, yeah, sure, maybe it could be low risk, high reward. Personally, I don't think he's going to be there, especially with the young talent in Tampa Bay and whatnot. But, maybe crossing over to the American League, seeing some new teams and whatnot could be good for him. I definitely see him being in the bullpen, though. I don't see him starting, at least right away. So maybe get a spot start every now and then just to see, because their bullpen's loaded too. I mean, you got Nick Anderson, Diego Castillo. So we shall see, but that's a little bit better of a contract for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it's one of those buy low guys for sure. And, normally I would be 100%, yeah, he's probably not going to be anything other than maybe an innings eater if he's healthy, but it's the Rays. And so they just turn anything into gold, basically. One other guy I did want to talk about, maybe you'll like this Giants signing a little bit more because it's only for $800,000, and that was them picking up John Brebbia from the Cardinals. He's another Tommy John guy, and that's something I don't know if maybe I'm just noticing it more this year than usual, but it seems like there are a lot of guys signing that are Tommy John guys that are signing for, either just 1 year if they're going to be back sooner, or just taking multiple year deals. Maybe that's the new move in the offseason. But
so how much did he sign for?
So it's 1 year, $800,000. Is that cheap enough for you?
Oh, it's an absolute ripoff. You're going to give this man $800,000 just because he hasn't been in the league long enough and he has Tommy John, but you're going to give Anthony DeSclafani, who posted 7.22 ERA last year and has had a 3.89 the year before, who's also had issues. You're going to give him $6 million? Are you kidding me? Unbelievable.
So you're going to – I don't have Anthony DeSclafani's numbers pulled up in front of me, but I'm guessing you do because you keep referencing them. So, super small sample size, if I'm not mistaken, for 2020, it had to have been just roughly 9 starts, and he dealt with health issues.
That's exactly my point.
Right. So, it's just 1 year in a small sample size. But when he's been healthy, has Anthony DeSclafani been a good pitcher?
He's been all right. I mean, I think he's been a little bit above average for sure. Nothing like crazy elite. I mean, most of his career, he's not been healthy. So, I don't know, and I get it with John Brebbia. He's only been in the league for 3 years, and he didn't even play in 2020 and whatnot. But, I mean, 3.14 ERA and a 3.39 FIP, which is my favorite right there, and a 1.1 WHIP. Doesn't walk a lot of guys either, and has over 10 strikeouts per 9 innings. I think this guy is pretty raw, and it's an absolute steal, obviously, for the Giants. Maybe that's why they were able to pay DeSclafani $6 million, but I don't know. It just sucks for him,
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more than league minimum. He's coming off Tommy John, and he doesn't have the pedigree of a guy like Tommy Kahnle. So I get it, but I think it's a good signing for them.
Yeah. Well,
all right. Well, if it's all right with you, unless you have anyone else that you want to rip on their contract for, we can move on to the 2 trades that happened since the last time we've recorded.
Go for it.
Does that sound all right to you?
Yeah, that's all right, man.
All right, so this one just went down, I believe, yesterday. The Nationals acquired Josh Bell in exchange for right-handed pitchers Will Crowe and Eddie Yan. This is extremely selling low, so good job again, Pirates front office. Way to screw up another one. Josh Bell in 2020, 226, 305, 364 slash line in 57 games. He's a guy that still has team control. It's not like this is his last year before free agency either. So I'm not really sure why the Pirates are selling right now. I find it very hard to believe that they lost a whole lot of money, especially considering that their payroll is only like $40 million anyways. But, to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, to each their own, but this is good for the Nationals. Zimmerman went down because he didn't want to participate in the season because of COVID, which is completely understandable. Honestly, I would have done the same thing. Then they brought in Eric Thames, and Eric Thames, it was just a 1-year deal, so he's not there anymore. Having a guy like Josh Bell coming into a Nationals park, which is honestly more pitcher friendly, he's got a lot of power, big bat there from both sides of the plate. He's not great at defense, but neither was Ryan Zimmerman or Eric Thames, so you don't really lose a whole lot there at first base. And also, if you need to, you can slide him out there in the outfield every now and then if you need to. So I think this offers a lot of flexibility for the Nationals. He's a veteran guy, and he had an amazing 2019 season, at least the first half. And I think maybe going to a new team, breath of fresh air, where the coaches are actually decent, that might help Josh Bell perform even better. So I'm actually really excited to see what he does for the 2021 season.
Yeah, and the Nationals are a team that we'll talk about later when we get into the guys that are still on the market and who's been interested. But they really seem like a team that's trying to go all in right now and make a play to go get that top spot in the NL East. And, they're buying low right now, Josh Bell. And like you mentioned, he's had good seasons in the past. The potential is definitely there. And it's multiple years of control. So I really like this move for them. For the Pirates, they're getting Will Crowe, who is the number 3 prospect in the Nationals organization.
Butt cheeks.
And Eddie Yan, who is number 6 prospect in their organization. Will Crowe, already in his mid-20s, probably a guy that's going to come in and compete right away. Yan only being 19 is probably going to be one that we're going to be waiting on for a few years. His stock's been up as far as prospect pedigree, but also he's going to the Pirates, who are definitely not known for being able to develop arms. I mean, you look at what guys like Garrett Cole, Tyler Glasnow, and Charlie Morton have done once leaving the Pirates, and what guys like Chris Archer have done since coming to the Pirates. So, not exactly the best place I'd want to land if I were a pitching prospect, but not like they have any control over that. And, the one other thing I want to mention with this deal, because you mentioned his name a few times, is that the Nationals did come out and say that because they went out and got Bell does not mean that a reunion with Ryan Zimmerman's out of the question.
Right.
So we may still see him back there again next year.
Yeah, and that would be awesome, and I really hope so. I mean, he's a lifelong National. He was the only player who was actually on the Nationals from the very inception there in 2005. I mean, he's been around for a long time, but he had a monster 2017 season, hit over 320 and mashed the ball, I mean, just out of nowhere. And, I mean, he's still been decent at the plate, but, the fielding's not there for sure. I mean, I think I would rather have Josh Bell at first base, but Zimmerman's only limited to first base. Now, if they brought the universal DH, that'd be a perfect storm, right? You have Josh Bell, you could just intertwine them back and forth, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them throw Josh Bell out there in the outfield every now and then. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but Will Crowe, good luck the rest of your career, my dude, because that is going to be tough. Definitely going to be in the majors, I'd say, or at least close to being in the majors again, because, I mean, the Pirates, they have Trevor Williams.
Actually, they don't have Trevor Williams. They let him go. So no more Trevor Williams.
Will Crowe, I apologize. Your career is officially over. You can keep that negative 0.5 WAR and the 11.88 ERA and see it decline rapidly again. I don't wish that upon you, but unfortunately, it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, and the Pirates are probably going to be a team that we're going to talk about a few more times this year, because they're also looking to shop Jameson Taillon, who's coming off Tommy John, Steven Brault, who's been a solid reliever for them in the past, and basically anything else that's already MLB ready, they're looking to push out the door. So
why are they even a Major League Baseball team? Honestly,
yeah,
why?
I don't.
I mean, I don't get it. You trade away Austin Meadows, who everyone knew he was the real deal, okay? You trade him to the Tampa Bay Rays. Since then, Austin Meadows has absolutely shoved, okay? I'm talking top 10 outfielder by far for his position. And then you get Chris Archer, big ego guy, nothing over the top. It's just, I don't understand the moves that the Pirates front office that they're making. It doesn't make sense. And right now, with how close the NL Central division is with competition, I mean, you look at the Brewers, even this year in a shorter season, they were still able to compete. There's 4 other teams other than the Pirates that they have to get around and that they have to battle just to even maybe get a wild card spot. And they're just digging themselves a deeper hole right now, because the Cardinals are making moves. The Cubs will start making moves very soon, I feel like, with Rizzo and Chris Bryant potentially. I just don't understand it, man. And I mean, it's good for Josh Bell to get out of there, honestly. But I mean, they have no one. So they have Cabrian Hayes. Love that guy. That dude's absolutely filthy. But other than that, man, I don't know.
Yeah, it's full-fledged rebuild mode for them. They're going to pick up Kumar Rocker with the first pick in this year's draft. Cabrian Hayes, like you mentioned, is already there. But I have a feeling that unless something changes, I think we're going to be talking about Cabrian Hayes the same way that we talk about Trey Mancini, like we did earlier, where it's this one guy who's always playing like an all-star and there's just nothing around him. So it's definitely going to be sad to watch unless something really changes. Mm-hmm. So we talk about another weird, bad move for another NL Central team. Minor trade, but the Reds acquired Scott Heineman from the Rangers for 20-year-old infielder Jose Acosta. And the only reason I even mention this trade is just because of the stark difference in talent between these two guys. So the Reds acquired Scott Heineman, likely to be just a AAA outfielder, but in the big leagues he's a career 189, 259, 331 slash at the big league level, which is just not good. And And what they gave up in infielder Jose Costa between the Dominican Summer League and the Arizona Rookie League in 2019, he slashed 395, 481, 579, and I believe was only one hit away from hitting 400 for the entire season between those two levels. So not really one that makes a whole lot of sense to me. It seems like if you wanted AAA outfielder depth, he probably could have signed that and kept a guy like Jose Acosta around. But that seems to be the way of the market in the NL Central, is to just ship everybody out.
You know how the Reds could have avoided this if they didn't get rid of freaking Taylor Trammell. But no, this is an absolutely horrific trade. I mean, this is worse than the Josh Bell trade, in my opinion. You're trading a kid 18, 19, 20 years old, what have you, posting those kind of godly numbers. I mean, just because you're in minor leagues and whatnot doesn't mean you're not seeing talent, right? I mean, you're still seeing lively arms and whatnot, some good movement. And then you trade him for Scott Heineman, who has played in 25 games in 2019, not even the COVID season, and then played in 24 games in 2020. One that just shows you how bad the Rangers were with their depth. But this guy, if you don't even bat over your weight, don't talk to me. And, it's an absolute joke. It's an absolute joke. And it is a shame because the Reds already have so much outfield depth at the major league level that Scott Heineman can go ahead and wash their bed sheets, okay? I mean, get on a plane, go somewhere else, go to the Royals. You'll maybe get some playing time there. But when you're age 28 and you've had somewhat 2 years already and you're not hitting your weight, we've got issues. So, Jose Acosta, obviously, that's going to be huge for the Rangers. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the major leagues here in a couple of years.
Yeah, so I want to stick with the Reds as we move on to the guys that have been brought up in trade talks here recently. So some combination of Jeff Passan, Ken Rosenthal, and John Heyman have reported that Sonny Gray, Luis Castillo, Eugenio Suarez, and Mike Moustakas are all up in trade talks currently. And Rob, what's your take on that for the Reds?
What are we doing is my take. I don't understand. You go out, you sign Mike Moustakas for 4 years, $65 million or something like that, and now you're going to put him on the trade block. First of all, Moose was injured a little bit in 2020. The dude is absolutely nasty, okay? You need that bat in the Griffey right field. You need it. He's raw. He can still play defense, obviously. He did very well for his low mobility that he does have. I think the one guy I do think that they maybe should trade is Eugenio Suarez, because just because he had a down year this past year, the dude's still raw, has a lot of pop in his bat, very good defensively. We got him for a nickel from the Detroit Tigers for Alfredo Simon, and then we ended up getting Alfredo Simon back. So all in all, I think it's time to realize that Eugenio Suarez has been great with the Reds and whatnot. I know he's under contract, but you get some prospects, get some arms or something to help out that bullpen since we no longer have Raisel Iglesias. I think it's absolutely just crazy to even think that you're going to trade Sonny Gray or Luis Castillo. Sonny Gray is the perfect fit for the Reds. His first 2 years in Great American Ballpark with the Reds, he's absolutely shoved. I mean, he is a small market ball player. He shoved in Oakland, as we know, got traded to New York. We all know how that happened. And then, or how that went. And then he got traded or signed with Cincinnati, and it's just been nothing but lights, just shining. And same with Castillo. Castillo, I consider, I mean, he's literally the epitome of Jose Fernandez, like a long-lost brother. Jose Fernandez was my favorite pitcher, my favorite player in the game of baseball. And Castillo was on the Marlins too. And so just seeing the similar comparisons in that regard, it's just hard, man. It's just hard.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to move the guys they're looking to move. Outside of maybe Mike Moustakas, because I don't know why they signed him to a 4-year, $64 million deal when they did. That was an overpayment at the time.
You think so?
Especially, yeah, and with the profile that he has, it doesn't make sense for him to age well. He's already a guy that's a low 200s hitter. The defense, the metrics were down on him this year. especially if the universal DH isn't going to be a thing, then it kind of hampers them defensively because they can't really move him with Votto being under contract through 2024. And they've already got other guys that are also really bad at defense that might need that DH spot, Nick Castellanos and Jesse Winker. So if there were a guy of the four I'd want to move, Moustakas makes the most sense. But guys like Sonny Gray, Luis Castillo, and Eugenio Suarez are just dream contracts for small market teams. Sonny Gray controlled through 2023, Cy Young potential, never going to make more than $12 million. Luis Castillo is also team-friendly contract going into his first year of arbitration this offseason, and he's projected to make $6 million. For another guy that's Cy Young potential. Eugenio Suarez, who you mentioned as having a down year, which I think is a big misconception amongst a lot of reports this year, but he's a guy that signed through 2026, and he's never going to make more than like $13 million. So you have three guys there that are all-star or better players that are making next to no money when you compare them to people that are putting up the same stats. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better than that if you're a small market team. I mentioned, with Suarez, yeah, everyone likes to say he had a down year, but if you take out the first 10 games, which is really not all that much when you think about what it would be in a full season, after those 10 games, he had an OPS of 871 and hit 15 home runs. Last 29 games of the year, he slugged over 600. So he's not a guy that's on a down year. He just had a bad week and a half. And so I don't know why we're trying to move him. It doesn't make sense, especially with the NL Central being as wide open as it is right now. Now would be the time to spend some money because no one else is. And, solidify your spot at the top of the NL Central. One of the things that a lot of people are saying are, they're just trying to sell high on someone to get prospects back. It's not a salary dump. They're just trying to get prospects while someone like Sonny Gray's at the top of their, at the top of what they're going to bring back in terms of value. But the problem with that is A, no one wants to take on any money this year. And B, if they're really just trying to sell off, to get someone at the highest value, then we'd only be hearing one name. And the fact that we've heard Sonny Gray, we've heard Luis Castillo, we've heard Suarez, and we've heard Moustakas means that they're just trying to dump payroll, and it's not to try and get prospects back. I mean, we've already seen it with Rysel, and I would assume that we're probably going to continue to see it all offseason, but it just doesn't make sense.
Okay. I don't know, I disagree, but, I mean, hey, teach their own. It's all good.
Yeah, so the other guy that's been up in trade rumors, and you know how much we love to hate the Dodgers for doing good things, but Nolan Arenado's been up for trade discussions from the Rockies, and the two teams that have seemed to have been connected to him the most are the Mets and the Dodgers. Imagine that, the one team that's out spending money and the team that just gets anybody that they want. So Arenado's owed $199 million through 2026. He's an opt-out after 2021. How do you feel about A, the Rockies moving him, and B, those two places as destinations?
I definitely think the Rockies should trade him because in that contract that you mentioned, it is an opt-out after the fourth year, and this is going on year 3 of that contract. So essentially, he'd only have 2 years left before he could opt out, which obviously I think he will. I think he's going to miss the friendly air and the confines of Coors Field, but we all know he's a top third baseman in all of Major League Baseball still. I mean, defensively, just elite. A lot of pop in his bat, hitting gap to gap, spraying the ball to all parts of the field. Really almost like a 5-tool player. I'll say 4-tool. He's not crazy fast, but he gets it done. And I didn't even think about the Mets. Honestly, I thought the Cardinals would be a really good fit for him, but they might not have as much money, like you mentioned. And then with the new ownership and how the culture is in New York, honestly, I would love to see him in a Mets uniform. I would. I think that would be absolutely nasty. Him, Pete Alonso, I am blanking right now. Brandon Nimmo. I mean, you have all those guys. Dominic Smith, who had a monster year. I mean, the Mets are good, and I would love to see him there. It's just going to be interesting to see what they could give up, though. So they're going to have to give up probably someone in the big league level because their farm system isn't crazy elite. But if the Mets are willing to eat part of his contract, which I would assume they would, then I think they wouldn't have to give up as much, obviously. So I don't know. I'd obviously like to see him more in the Mets than the Dodgers, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. He would be a really good fit with the Mets because they're trying to win now, like we'll talk about in a little bit, they're all over the market in terms of the top guys and being interested. They already went out and paid James McCann. They've been linked to Bauer. They've been linked to Springer. It makes sense for them to go out and get a guy like this, especially because the chance of him opting out with the New York Mets is much lower than what it is right now. Probably coming out on top. They lost Justin Turner this year to free agency. He hasn't signed anywhere yet, but it seems like Nolan Arenado would maybe be a better fit for them than Justin Turner, just because of the age and the fact that he's already under contract. But either way, it's definitely going to be something to watch with him having an opt-out after this year. So to move on a little bit, Rob, I sent you a list of free agents before we started. And basically what we're going to do is kind of go over some of the guys on that list and just talk about what we think the market looks like for them, maybe some different places that they could be. And so, Rob, I'll kick it off to you first. Is there anyone you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'd really like to talk about Marcell Ozuna, actually. I think Marcell Ozuna has been a very special player and has surprised some people with what he's been able to do with the Braves. This is a guy, too, that, I'd really like to see at a very good ball club. 175 OPS plus, 1,000 OPS in 2020. I mean, he's just getting better and better, honestly, every year. I mean, you look down the board, it goes 338, 241, and then 265. I mean, he's just getting better and better. And his OBP eclipsed 430. I'm trying to wonder, and I want to ask your opinion, like, where are some good teams that you see fit for Marcell Ozuna?
Well, the teams that have been the most linked to him so far have been the Mets, which I think, if the universal DH comes back, yeah, and that's really that's kind of what the big key is for Marcell Ozuna, and a couple other guys we would talk about, is that a lot of them are waiting to see if that's going to be a thing or not. Because Marcell Ozuna, he played mostly just DH this year. The defense has, really kind of dropped off for him in the last couple of years. And so, that's going to be a big factor. But I know that the Mets have been interested, and I think I like Springer more for them than I like Marcell Ozuna, just because of how big their outfield is.
Agreed.
But, that's a possibility. The Blue Jays, I think, would be a fun fit. I think he'd be a welcomed addition to the middle of their lineup, kind of bring a bit of a veteran presence to that young core that they have, and I think that he would do well in Toronto. And then the other team that he's been linked to so far has been the San Francisco Giants. Wow. I know you've been on their case about spending money so far, but I think that would be an interesting destination for him. I don't necessarily think it makes the most sense for the Giants given their current standing, but I would say that those are the three, at least so far this offseason, who have reached out, and it seems like the most likely destinations.
Yeah, and I'm not just saying this because I'm hating on the Giants, but yeah, I don't really see that fit. I really don't. Not with the culture and just the way their lineup is oriented and whatnot. I definitely agree with you though with Toronto. I think that is a very good young core. And also Vlad Jr. has slimmed down a lot, which is huge because that was going to be one of the big issues that I was wondering about, is like, will he be able to play third base? Will he be able to play first base? And the question is yes, because he's slimmed down a lot this offseason. And so he'll be in good shape, probably going to be the first baseman. But, Toronto is just an interesting place to be. So it'll just have to depend on everything like that. So, but I actually really like Texas. Texas, I feel like, would be a really good spot because I believe they have Willie Calhoun as their DH. But, having Joey Gallo out there, having Marcell Ozuna, Rougned Odor, Elvis Andrus. I mean, you have veteran leadership all across the board. And that's a pretty fun team to watch too, I think, especially with the moves they make pitching-wise. So that's a team I'd like to see too.
Yeah, Texas, I hadn't even thought about them as a possible landing spot, but they would make a lot of sense if they're looking to move up their competitive window. I think given the current roster, they're probably still a year or two away. But, if you go out and you sign an impact bat like Marcell Ozuna, that's the kind of signing that takes you from, we're a year or two away to suddenly we're looking at a wild card spot, and maybe if things really fall our way, right into a shot at the division title. And so that's definitely a team that would make a lot of sense. So the first guy that I wanted to talk about was Ha-Seong Kim. He's a 25-year-old shortstop from the KBO that's been posted. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about him now is because the deadline for him to actually sign is New Year's Day. And so, there's been a lot of buzz around him here recently. It's been reported he's already got multiple five-year plus deals that have been offered to him. He makes a lot of sense as maybe a cheaper option than a guy like Didi Gregorius or Marcus Semien this year on the free agent list. And, he's a guy that absolutely mashed over in the KBO. In 2020, he slashed 310, 402, 530, and hit 28 home runs and swiped 21 bags, playing a premium position at shortstop. There's been a lot of teams connected to him. The Cardinals, the Reds, Padres, Blue Jays, Red Sox, and the Rangers, although I believe that with them signing Arihara, that probably is going to take them out of the running. But he's definitely a guy that could fit in a lot of different places, and I think will be a sneaky good addition for any team that gets their hands on him. Yeah,
no, I agree with you 100%. That's one player I'd like to talk about, and one player I'd like to talk about, is Liam Hendriks. Obviously, the A's won't be able to afford him, but also I feel like he really liked it in Oakland, and they're still a very young team and whatnot. But as much as I hate to say it, I really see him going to the Dodgers. One, because they can afford it and everything like that, and I think it just fits his personality, the culture. But also, yet again, the Mets. I think that'd be another good get. Let's say the Mets don't get Marcell Ozuna. He decides to sign with... if they don't get Noah Arenado, I apologize. If they don't get Noah Arenado in a trade where they have to eat some cash and some prospects, then why not go and get Liam Hendriks to kind of help solidify your bullpen even more? I think that'd be a good fit too. But I don't know. Kind of seems like a West Coast guy most of the time, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see. What do you think about Liam Hendriks?
Yeah, I mean, I like Liam Hendriks. You mentioned the Mets. I think that would definitely be a good fit for them with the way that they're treating this offseason. If I had to choose, I like the fit with Oakland. I'd like to see him stay there just because you don't often see guys stay in Oakland for a long period of time, and I want Oakland to be competitive, so I'd like to see him stay there. But if he's not going to stay in Oakland, then the team that I think I'd like to see him go to would be the White Sox.
Oh, that'd be. I agree.
They've already gone out and gotten Lance Lynn. They've got the young core, despite their awful manager that they've gone out and signed and stuck with for some reason. I still think they're going to be competitive and competing for the top spot in the AL Central. And he makes a lot of sense for them. Alex Colomé is a guy that they had in the back of the bullpen for them last year that was really good, and it's not decided yet whether or not he's going to be back. And so if you lose Alex Colomé, Liam Hendriks slots in right away as a back of the bullpen guy to replace him. And if you keep Alex Colomé, then suddenly you've got two guys you can turn to in the 8th and 9th pretty much every day and know what you're going to get and win ball games. So, he's a guy that I really like the fit for in Chicago.
Yeah, no, I could actually very well see him in Chicago for sure. The one player too that I think is really interesting too, and is Garrett Crochet, that rookie lefty who really helped the A's win the game because he got injured. I don't wish injuries upon anyone, but if he didn't get injured, I think the A's would have absolutely been shut down in Game 3 of the wild card series. But Garrett Crochet, coming out of Tennessee, absolutely gross 6'6" frame. Just having the veteran leadership of Liam Hendriks and the swagger and just coming in with the culture, I think it's really imperative. I mean, you just don't see guys drafted in the first round make their first appearance, in the same season, especially on a shortened season too, but it makes sense why they did. So, no, I think the White Sox are a good fit for Liam Hendriks too, but I would love to see him with the Athletics.
Yeah, no, I would too, for sure. So the next guy that I kind of wanted to talk about was Nelson Cruz. And not only because the dude would probably be a good fit for anyone that has a DH next season that's trying to be competitive, but also just because it's something that stumbled upon here recently is just like how good he continues to get as he gets older. So I was looking at his Fangraphs page, and so in his time with the Rangers, so he's been with 4 teams since he really kind of took off as a player: the Rangers, Orioles, Mariners, and Twins. And so I'm just going to run through his WRC plus with each of those teams, and you can see how as he just continues to get older, it just gets better. So with the Rangers, he ranged from a 106 to 147, but that 147 with the Rangers was kind of an outlier. It's usually in the 110 to 120 range. And I do want to mention for any of our listeners that aren't familiar with WRC plus, it's similar to OPS plus. Basically, it's on an index scale. So 100 is league average. Anything above 100 is like that percent above league average. So like if a guy has a 106 WRC plus, he's 6% above league average.
Decent.
Whereas a 147, you're 47% above league average, which is crazy good. So I did want to mention that. So he's roughly for the most part in the 110 to 120 range with the Rangers. Then he moves to the Orioles for 1 season and has a 137 WRC plus and leads the Orioles in home runs. I believe he had around like 50 that year, which is crazy good. Then he moved to the Mariners, signed with them. He was there for I believe 4 years and had a 133 to 158 WRC plus. And then his most recent deal, he signed with the Twins. That were his age 39 and age 40 seasons. He had a 163 and 164 WRC plus as a 40-year-old. So I don't know what it is with this guy. He's just insane at the plate. And, it's just crazy to me to see a guy continue to get better, especially a guy that started off for the first half of his career is like, we don't know if this guy can even hit in the big leagues. And now at age 40, he's putting up 164 WRC plus.
Yeah. One team name for you, and this is where I would love to see Nelson Cruz go, the Tampa Bay Rays. Think about Nelson Cruz and the Tampa Bay Rays as a DH. And the flexibility that they have with Ji-Man Choi, and that would be absolutely disgusting. He would hit the top of the dome, Lord knows how many times. But I like Nelson Cruz at Tampa Bay. Originally, I liked him in Kansas City, but they have Jorge Soler, and it just doesn't seem right for him to go there, honestly. But anyway, Tampa Bay would be absolutely filthy. Same with the Red Sox, the Green Monster there, him with that pop and that power, going back to the AL East, when he was there for that 1 year with Baltimore, where he hit a league-leading 40 home runs. It would just be really cool to see. He still has it. Until he doesn't have it, keep playing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I the Red Sox, I definitely 100% could see that fit. Especially if they want to go the route of instantly being competitive again. We saw them get rid of Mookie Betts. They had a down year last year.
But then they have JD Martinez though too.
And they do have JD Martinez, so it would be dependent on whether or not they feel like he could play an outfield position for the whole season, which he probably can't.
Him and Benintendi in the outfield is awful. That is not a good combo.
But is the offensive production that you're going to get from Nelson Cruz worth, sucking up the fact that JD Martinez is going to miss routine fly balls in left field? And, to me, it might be, but, that's a decision that their front office will have to make. As far as the Rays go, in an ideal world, I absolutely love Nelson Cruz on the Rays. I think he'd be a huge addition to their lineup. The problem is I don't see any way that the Rays spend the money it would take to get a guy like Nelson Cruz. His most recent deal with the Twins, that was a 2-year deal, was 2 years, $26 million. I think he probably commands roughly around that same amount in another 2-year deal. And I don't see the Rays spending $13 million on a DH. But, I love the idea of him being in that lineup.
I can see him going back to Texas too, where he spent 7 seasons, or 8 seasons, excuse me. I think that'd be a good fit too. So, I mean, we talked about, obviously, Marcell Ozuna going there too, but I can see him going back to Texas as well as a nice little farewell.
Yeah, and you mentioned Texas, and I want to go ahead and move on to another player here.
Yeah,
and it's one that you had mentioned before, and I'm curious to get your take on Trevor Bauer to the Rangers, because I believe you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, I think Trevor Bauer to the Rangers, it's not the number one thing. I still think the Angels are probably in the best running for Trevor Bauer. I just don't know how they're structured financially, though, with that Mike Trout contract and the Anthony Rendon contract. But we know Dylan Bundy had a good year, and having him, Griffin Canning, Trevor Bauer, that'd be a nice 1-2-3 punch, and especially with Shohei Ohtani coming back. I think he should be good to be really unleashed there in the rotation. So that's 4 solidified pitchers, I think, or at least decent enough. But for the Rangers, like you said, Dane Dunning with that trade from the White Sox where they absolutely the Rangers absolutely fleeced the White Sox on that one. I think they have a lot of potential for sure. The interesting thing, though, too, who is a free agent, is Corey Kluber. That's going to be just all question marks. If Kluber was coming back to the Rangers, I could see it, but I don't know. I think the Rangers are probably, just in my opinion, this is all subjective, I think the Rangers are in his top 5 for sure, especially he has a home in Houston, too. I know he's not going to pitch for the Astros, but I'd say the top 3 right now, honestly, top 3, I would say are the Los Angeles Angels at 1, San Diego Padres at 2, and the Detroit Tigers at 3, actually. So, but then the Rangers, I'd say, are at 4.
All right, so I'm curious then how you feel about him fitting with the Tigers, because that's not even a team that I'd heard of as far as consideration for Bauer.
Yeah, so he actually had some meetings, him and Rachel Luba, his free agent, oh my gosh, his agent. He had some meetings with AJ Hinch. And if you watch his YouTube vlogs too, I mean, he even says like he still respects him, like he's still like a good coach and whatnot. And AJ Hinch is a good manager. If you really look at just the baseball aspect of it, he is. And the Tigers have, having Spencer Torkelson, who's the other big guy that they have? Casey Mize coming up in the works. They have a lot of young arms coming through. Alex Fado. A lot of young arms coming up in that system. And, Trevor Bauer going back to the AL Central in a way could be very beneficial for him. And just having that like-mindedness with AJ Hinch, a young manager and whatnot. I just think it fits well. And then, obviously, the 5th team I see Trevor Bauer going to are the Reds. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have him kind of pegged. I hadn't thought about the Rangers or Tigers. To me, it seems like their competitive window is probably a year or 2 off from going out and getting a guy like Trevor Bauer, especially with the Rangers just sending Lance Lynn, who's already a top of the rotation guy, to the White Sox. And then the Tigers, I think that they're more than a Trevor Bauer away from being, top of the AL Central competitors. And so while it might make good sense on paper, I'm not sure that the rest of the team around them would be enough for it to make sense for Trevor. For me, the top 3 teams are the Angels, Padres, and Mets, I think in that order. Mm-hmm. I want to speak Trevor Bauer to the Angels into existence because I think that, like you mentioned, with them already having Bundy, Griffin Canning, and Shohei Ohtani returning, like that rotation plus Bauer is probably enough to get the Angels to the postseason. Yeah. And I'm tired of Mike Trout not being in the postseason.
We need Mike Trout.
He's the best player in baseball, yes. And it just needs to happen. The Padres, he's from Southern California. His boy Mike Clevenger just signed there. Mm-hmm. They're a team that's competitive windows just opening up. A lot of fun young guys there. And I think it makes a lot of sense for Bauer to go there. And I think it would make a lot of sense for the Padres to go get him because of what Bauer's reputation is as far as being able to help other pitchers. Like a lot of players that have played with him have called him basically just an extra coach in the dugout because he's always willing to help. And I think with their young arms that they have coming up through the system, it'd make a lot of sense. And then the Mets they're the Mets this offseason, and they're just going out and spending money on basically anything with talent that breathes. And so I think that Bauer next to DeGrom and that rotation in a more pitcher-friendly ballpark instead of a hitter-friendly one like Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati would be really good, especially because you don't know what you're going to get out of Noah Syndergaard coming off Tommy John surgery. Mm-hmm. I think that he would be really good for them too. And the other guy I want to mention briefly because you had mentioned Corey Kluber. He missed a lot of time the last 2 off seasons with injuries. And something to keep an eye on that had gotten announced is he's going to do an audition for clubs in January. So he's probably a guy that's far off from signing. I think he makes more sense as a guy that's kind of like a low guaranteed value, high like incentives contract, but it'll be something to keep an eye on. All right. We're running a little long on time, so why don't you pick one more guy that you want to talk about, and I'll pick one, and we'll run through them and then wrap it up.
Yeah, the last one I want to talk about is JT Realmuto. Realmuto, as we know, has been a solidified catcher for the past couple of years. Even when he was in Miami, I knew he was going to be the real deal. He even spent some time at first base, but he really came into his own, especially going to Philadelphia. He spent 2 years there so far, and I think, honestly, staying in the division, just his entire career, I think the Nationals will be a really good fit for him. Having that veteran leadership, some good pop time behind the plate, and obviously with a decent bat, I think the Nationals would benefit tremendously from him, especially since the Nationals don't have a Bryce Harper contract. So I think they could go out and spend some money. Now that depends too if they want to try and make a late run at either Corey Kluber or Trevor Bauer, but I could definitely see JT Realmuto going to the Nationals. I don't think the Phillies kind of fit his culture, the way he plays. Don't get me wrong. I love his name's escaped. Oh, Joe Girardi. I do think he's a great manager, but I still think it seems like the Phillies should have been really starting to compete 2 years ago, it seems like, but they haven't been there, and I don't think they're still going to be there. So I think it's time for Realmuto. He tested the waters there in Philadelphia. I think it's time for him to branch out and go to the Nationals.
Yeah, I love the fit with the Nationals and JT Realmuto. He's staying with a team that's competitive. You've got their big three at the top of the rotation with Scherzer, Strasburg, and Patrick Corbin. They really, what they're missing is a complementary bat to Juan Soto in the lineup, and JT Realmuto will provide that for him. He's a legitimately 5-tool player behind the plate, which is not something that you ever see very often.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense, especially with them going out and getting Josh Bell. Really kind of signifies that, hey, we're looking to compete. You mentioned this is another team. Interestingly enough, they actually have put out an offer, so they have an official offer to JT Realmuto. The details of it haven't been released to the public, but they're at least making an attempt to sign him back. But if I'm a Phillies fan, I would just be super upset with the way that this rebuild has gone for them. They took 3 years, did a rebuild. They come out of it. They're under 500 the first year back. They're a 500 team the second year back, and then they missed the playoffs as an under 500 team this year. So, and then you're going to let a guy like JT Realmuto walk. I would be pretty upset if I were a Phillies fan. But I think the Nationals make the most sense, with the Blue Jays being another team that might sneak in if they can, depending on how things go with other free agents, guys like George Springer and Marcell Ozuna. If they miss out there and Realmuto's still on the market, he can make sense as a guy they go after.
Yeah, and I would love to see Realmuto too. Like you said, like just kind of dabble back in Miami. The problem is Miami's market is just not that great. It's just not a baseball city per se, and it really is kind of sad because if you went back down to that team, that's a team that's up and coming. I mean, you got Brian Anderson, you have a bunch of guys, you have El Tigre, the man himself, Jesus Aguilar. I don't even know why I call him El Tigre. It just works. The Tiger. But I just think that team is up and coming, man, and they have really good pitching prospects. They have Sixto Sanchez that they traded for JT Realmuto because Sixto Sanchez was on the Phillies. Now imagine if the Marlins were able to get JT Realmuto back and just kind of be like a big, nice little middle finger there to the Phillies, right? But yeah, I'm interested to see how much that offer is for JT Realmuto. I think Realmuto is probably worth around, I'd say, probably the $15 to $16 million range per year. I think that's safe to say. But obviously it depends on how the market is, but we all know the catching market isn't that great. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's increased a little bit too.
Yeah, and the last guy that I wanted to talk about, mostly because I want to talk about how ridiculous he's being right now, is another catcher. and that's Yadier Molina. He's been reached out to by the Cardinals, Nationals, and Padres. He wants a 2-year deal, and for some reason he thinks he's worth $10 million a year.
No.
I'm not exactly sure where he gets that notion.
No.
But basically the story behind it is that before, this year and all the pandemic and everything happened, the Cardinals came to him and offered him a 2-year $10 million or a 2-year $20 million extension, and he turned it down because he thought he was worth more than that. And then, pandemic hits, he's declining as a player, and now he goes back to the Cardinals and he's like, hey, I know you offered me $20 million over 2 years before. I'm ready to sign that deal now. And of course they're like, no, we're not going to do that because A, it's a pandemic, and B, he's not even close to being worth that. And so I just wanted to mention that purely to just talk about how crazy Yadier Molina is for thinking he's worth that. But do you have any final thoughts?
That just makes me super mad because he's using his resume as a reason for that $10 million. I have 2 World Series. I'm a 9-time All-Star, 9-time Gold Glove. I'm a 4-time Platinum Glove winner. I'm Yadier freaking Molina. I deserve $10 million. Oh, well, here's a number for you, Yadier. Okay, just listen to me. Hear me out. Okay, what's 100 minus 19, big guy? 81. That's right. That's your OPS plus. You're absolute trash. Okay, here is his slash line from just last year alone. All right, 262 batting average, 303 on base percentage, 359 slugging percentage. We all know Yadier Molina was never given that big money for hitting the home runs, okay? So obviously the OPS is 662. We can't, just knock him down for that. But defensively, yes, he can block. Great. Every catcher in Major League Baseball should be able to do that. Hell, even Jacob Stallings can do it. But, the arm's just not there anymore. Okay? He's 38 years old. He's going to turn 39 in July. He's just not worth it. Now, there might be a team that'll just be like, oh, we'll get fans to the ballpark. Yeah, we'll dish out maybe $9 million. But other than that, I don't see him worth more than $5 million, if that. So I think eventually if he's going to play, he is going to re-sign with the Cardinals, but it also seems like he's being kind of petty, and he might just go to some other team if they offer him the money. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is that James McCann just signed a 4-year deal for $40 million with the Mets. And so if James McCann is worth $10 million a year, which even him at $10 million might have been a little bit of, but like if he's worth $10 million and he at least hits above average and plays solidly behind the plate, then Yadier Molina, whose defense, is beginning to decline. And like you mentioned, he's almost 20 points below league average in terms of OPS plus. It's crazy to think that you'd be worth that, and he needs a new agent or someone else in his ear to be giving him better advice if that's how he's kind of handling this offseason. And so unless he's willing to come down, I kind of hope the Cardinals just don't bring him back just because it wouldn't make sense for them. But
yeah,
I think that's going to do it as far as what we had on topics to discuss. Rob, do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I would just like to thank everyone who always listens to us, and I hope that everyone had a Merry Christmas, and if you were able to spend time with your families, that you were safe and whatnot. Just be sure that you subscribe to our website. It's free at chalktalknation.com. If you're watching on YouTube, it's scrolling across the top. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and also on our website at chalktalknation.com. If you subscribe, you'll get a reminder every time we publish an episode. We don't spam email at all. We send an occasional newsletter just kind of letting know the progression of the channel and like what to expect. But that's all I have, Noah.
All right, well, we just want to say thank you guys for listening. Happy belated Christmas. In the near future, be on the lookout for Hall of Fame discussion with that coming up, with the ballots being due here in the next month. And then something else we're going to look to do, and let us know if this is something you're interested in. But it got a lot of traction last year. A lot of you guys seem to really love it. And so we're going to start doing positional rankings again here sometime in the near future as well. But that's all Rob and I have for you. And so thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.